In this lesson, we'll move on to taking inputs from the user using what Flutter calls forms. The special thing about this lesson is that we finally get to unveil the big project that we will be building throughout the rest of this course. Now, you probably already know about it from the marketing and the first videos introducing the course, but just to get some excitement going, let's get a drum roll. So the project we will be building is a Twitter clone. Over the next couple lessons, we're going to be building out this login screen. Now, this design should remind you a little bit of Twitter. Their design does change pretty often, but this is something close that we can get to. We're going to be building out two different screens in the next couple lessons. First is this login screen, and then you can't really have a login screen without letting the users sign up first. We're going to add one extra thing to both of these screens, and that is some validation. We want to make sure the users are entering valid emails in the email field and a password that's a little bit more secure and has at least 6 letters and characters in it. Now let's get to the code. So we're going to start off with an empty application with nothing really in it except the app bar title changed to the Twitter clone. The very first thing we need in order to allow users to sign up is to give them a way to input some text or some characters in. There's a couple ways to do this. The most basic way is using a widget called a text field. If we save that, you can come over here. You see, you can type stuff in. Everything looks great. But we're actually not going to use a text field. Instead, we're going to use something called a text form field. And we're going to have that text form field wrapped in a widget called a form. Now, this looks exactly the same as a text field looked. So why did we do it this way? Well, the text form field has a very special property on it that we will need to use called validator. This validator property allows us to define what a valid input is for that specific field. In the next lesson, I'll go a little deeper into this validator and we'll actually define how to validate the data, but that's why we need to use a text form field instead of a text field. The second thing is this form. So the reason we need a form is because we're going to end up having two text form fields. We're going to have this one for the email, and then we will have another text form field for a password. What the form allows us to do, it allows us to validate both of these form fields instead of having to validate them individually. We can just get all the forms within the specific field and validate them all and see if all our entries are valid before we move on to logging the user in. So now we're able to get the data, we're able to type it in, but we don't have any way to submit it. So let's add a button before we do anything else. We're going to do an elevated button, and we're going to have a text inside saying to submit. So looking at our application, we have all the components we need in order to have a person log in. But if we submit, nothing really happens. These text form fields aren't tied to the actual button. And that's because we don't have anything retrieving that data and using it at all. If we hover over the text form field, we'll see they have a property called controller. And it is of a type called text editing controller. Now, the Flutter team is very creative. They named this controller in a specific way because it controls the text that you are editing. Think of this as like a manager for whatever the data inside your text field is. The special thing that it manages is retrieving the actual text that is within the text field. Let's go ahead and define two controllers. We're going to have one for the email and then one for the password as well. And we can assign each controller to its specific text form field. Okay, so now our controllers are assigned to the text form fields, and the next step is to retrieve the data from them. We're not going to implement the whole sign-up authentication and all that stuff just yet, coming up in the next couple lessons, but we're going to just print out the information that the user gives us. So first we want to print out their email, and you retrieve that by calling the email controller and getting the text within the email controller. And let's do the same thing for the password. And let's spell password right because this is a official Twitter application. Okay, so there we go. If we bring up our terminal, our debug console, and we type in an email, let's say tadas@gmail.com, password, a very secure one of 123456. If we click submit now, we should be able to see it pop up here, and we're able to retrieve that text from our form fields and later on use this text in order to actually log the user in. So that's how you retrieve the text. But let's get back to the text form field. If you've used Twitter or any other big application, you'll see that the email field usually has a slightly different keyboard. It usually has an @ symbol and a period to make it easier for you to type in your email. We can do that in Flutter too. The text form field has a property called keyboard type. And we can set the text input type to be email address. So we save that and we click back into that email field. You'll see you get an @ sign and a period within our keyboard. Makes it a lot easier for the user to type it in. Now the password. This doesn't look very professional either. Anybody can snoop over your shoulder, see what type of password you're typing in, especially if you use this password for many other applications. That's not a good sign. That's not very secure. Thankfully, Flutter allows you to handle that as well, using a property called obscure text. If you set this to true, now you have little dots, and when you're typing in your password, nobody can see what you're typing, and it's a little more safe. Now, the last thing that we got to add to this form. When you're looking at this, you have no idea what these text form fields are. If we just leave it like this, people are going to get to our login screen, and they might just be confused, like, what is this for? We need to somehow let the user know that the first one is an email, and this one is a password. We can do that by setting some decoration. Go to the property of decoration and add an input decoration and then a hint text, which we can say enter an email. And we save that. We see when there's an empty field, we see the enter an email text. And as soon as we start typing, it goes away and takes in our actual email. Now we can do the same thing for the password, except here we'll say enter a password. So now we're able to type in an email. Using a keyboard that is specific for emails. We're able to type in a password with our text obscured so nobody could see what we're typing. And then when we click the submit button, we're able to see it pop up in our terminal with all the values that we inputted. Now in the next lesson, we're going to add some validation to this to make sure that the inputs that they're giving us are valid. See you there.